coming up on episode 5 of Poker Inferno. Right, so we have Ace of Hearts, Queen of Clubs here in the small blind. We've opened 3 big blinds and villain calls in the big blind. The flop is 6, 5 for rainbow, 6 of spades, 5 of hearts, 4 of clubs. We check the flop, villain bets half pot here, and we decide to raise pretty huge. That's a big raise. We've raised like 6x that half pot bet. So what was your thought process here? I was just thinking, if we don't raise a hand like this ever, then we're not going to have much board coverage for ace turns and queen turns, so we need to raise this hand at a certain frequency. Did you just say board coverage? Aye, board coverage. Well, the problem with that is board coverage is not a thing. Why did I do this fucking series? Why did I do this to myself? Oh god, man. Alright, ladies and gents, we are back with Poker Inferno, episode number 5. Welcome to the channel. Spuds, how's it going, man?
It's good, yeah, doing good today. Ready to go.
What are you going to be playing for YouTube today? What stake, what game?
We're going to be playing 25NL fast forward on Party Poker.
Nice. Give everyone a very quick snapshot about where you are in poker at the moment.
Yeah, so I've been playing poker for around 7 years now. Mostly played live through uni, and then past year and a half picked up CPS, been playing a lot more online. I've worked through grade 1, halfway through grade 2, and I've done cash injection.
Nice. Okay, so you're like maybe a third of the way through your Carrot Corner poker education. Remember, guys, Black Friday is coming up. If you would like to dip your toes into the orange waters of Carrot Corner Poker Education, this is a pretty good time to do it because we're going to be doing 25% off everything on site. And if you've never got our products before, the Golden Carrot, our brand new big package deal where you save the most money, is also going to be 25% off. But let's get into this session. Let's let the cards flow here, and we will sit and sit out of 25NL fast forward on Party.
So we have Jack 10 facing a limp, a call. We could isolate this, but I think there's going to be too much continuing, and we could end up going multi-way in a bloated pot. So I'm just going to check back. Really interesting flop texture here. We could start playing some leads, but I think this hand just kind of wants to see a turn. I don't think there's much reason to do anything else. This guy this guy folded. Oh, jeez. Hot. I think there's a decent amount of implied odds, but we don't have that many outs. But given the implied odds and how deep we are, if we hit a clean king or an 8 like that, I think there's a lot of money that could be won here. He now downsizes a bit. I think there's a lot of 2-pair in range. What the best sizing here is, I'm not too sure. I'm going to let to go for 35, which is just over pot. I think that's a nice sizing. I'm gonna cry.
Oh my god. You stressed me out so much there, and I thought I was going to be able to sigh in relief.
Oh no. It's so sad.
Oh my god, editor, do something. Do something, editor. Make this dramatic. Oh no.
Oh, it's so sick.
Oh, it hurts. It hurts so much. It's hurting inside my soul because I was watching you time down with the deliberation, which has been the theme today, is you've been a little bit like stuck in deliberation. Yeah, you're overthinking for sure. And I was like, please just raise something big. Just anything big, like 40 something. Like, let's just go big. Yeah, I want to talk about the hand though, because it is an interesting one. Let's take a deep breath. What's done is done. Let's review this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we face this on turn. I definitely think it's a call. Like, there's just so many things going on here. You're in position, you have control of pot growth. The thing that doesn't matter to me here is how deep you are exactly, because I don't think we're in the neck of the woods where that gets brought into play. Like, if you're in a 3-bet pot and you're 250 big blinds deep, that's like super relevant because you can bring 250 big blinds into play in a 3-bet pot very easily. If you're 200 deep in a 4-bet pot, that's like the most relevant SPR thing ever. whether you're 120 deep here or 240 deep here at this turn SPR, I don't actually care because it's going to be so rare that like it goes bet, raise, re-raise all in or something like that. And you're not going to jam like 200 big blinds over villains like B75 on the river, right? So that's not really why. I just think it's a very rich implied odds spot. You could have the best hand. There's some future fold equity if villain checks river, and there's loads of implieds. And the jack and the 10 could easily be outs here as well, because like recreationals are merging 9x in this spot and stuff like that. So very, very clear call. Was very relieved you didn't fold the turn. And then what I experienced on the river was the opposite of relief. And I think the sizing here should be very big because villain's value range is high in absolute hand strength, right? It's stuff like a set, it's stuff like two pair, which you correctly identified. And when a recreational player or likely recreational is value betting two pair plus, primarily, and some river top pair, you want to go huge with your river sizing. So how big here? I don't know. I'm thinking like overbet. So just to put that into perspective, that would mean if you called the $1.84, the pot would become 366 plus 290, 556, and then you'd have to make it to overbet the river. You'd have to make it like a further 750 or further $8 to villain, which means raising to like 10, 11, at least in this spot, and probably bigger than that still. So yeah, if you imagine it's that new pot that you're trying to size the extra amount into new pot after you'd called is how you actually calculate sizing. So I'm thinking like even bigger. I'm thinking like 12, 13, something like that here.
Okay. Yeah. Huge. And definitely don't fold.
Yeah, probably don't fold. And if you are going to fold, just fold instantly to shock the audience instead of timing out because it's less painful for me.
Okay, good player opens the button. We have an optional 3-bet here against the sizing. I think against a good player, I'm wanting to play a smaller pot. I don't really want to 3-bet, although it also means we take it down pre a lot more and we don't have to play a position. I will like to call this time. Flopping top pair on the driest board in the history of the world. You will range bet this. I'm trying to work out if raise is good, and I think it might be. The problem is I don't know how he's going to react to this. I'm hoping that because I played with him a little bit, he will give me some credit to have a decent amount of bluffs in this spot. So to balance that, I think I do want to play some raise. I'm wondering if King Queen's a better cutoff, but given he's range betting, I'm going to call because it means he gives him more opportunity to just barrel turns. So he snap checks, basically. Not much thought process. Interesting. I'm between a small lead here and a check. I think he's going to have a lot of still air hands, but may have some 10x. Although 10x may feel enticed to bet anyway, so I'm just going to check here. I do absolutely see the reason for leading small, but I think this guy will go thin enough for the 10 to want to take that line. That may be a blunder, though. We shall see.
All right. So I think you need to chill a bit with your thought processes on the early streets that kind of have more of a default plan. And I'm going to recommend something that I almost never recommend. It's like a very rare prescription. And I feel almost like guilty about doing this because I wonder how much harm I'm about to cause to my audience by recommending this. You probably have an idea what I'm about to recommend.
I'm actually not too sure.
I'm going to prescribe you a very gentle daily dosage of RNG. RNG is a great way against a reg when you are literally just not sure what's better. Like you're on the flop here, you know that raise is a thing against a range bet, and if villain is range betting, that should push you more towards raising thinner because your hand is higher equity and it just falls into more of a value bucket. When you went off on that adventurous thought process about he can barrel turn more because he's range betting, like sure, but GTO also knows that, and we know that GTO raises more against wider ranges than tight ones. So like go with the broad strokes here, not like the really sort of specific factors. And once you know that it is okay to raise and it is okay to call, and villain is a good player against whom presumably you don't think they're playing badly, particularly against either of those options, then you can just take the pressure off yourself and roll, because this trying to figure out down to the wire what the best play is in a spot that you've already kind of concluded you could do either, I think it's sort of detrimental and it's going to, vex you and sap your energy quite badly. And there's a very good chance that you wouldn't do this if you weren't one tabling on YouTube and trying to like nail every spot, right? So I appreciate that's probably what's going on. But yeah, you are allowed to RNG spots against good players that you think are just basically you're going to just approach them theoretically, and your hands are mixed in theory. You're allowed to RNG that, right? As long as you're not using it as a cop out or using it irresponsibly. Use RNGs responsibly, guys, or not at all. And we end up on the river here, and we have a dangler. Do you remember from your Carrot Poker School days, your Carrot Poker School studies, what a dangler is? Have you got to that point of grade 2 yet?
I don't believe I've heard of a dangler yet, no.
It may be in grade 3, actually. A dangler is a card that doesn't make too many good hands, right? So villain doesn't have a lot of straights here containing the jack, because jack 9 is quite likely to bet the turn, and it's just not that many combos, I guess. It's just one hand. And therefore, when villain has a jack here, they usually have air, right? They usually have ace jack or queen jack, these hands that weren't straight draws on the turn, or jack 6 suited or jack 5 suited. The jack is blocking a lot of air. When you have a card that's blocking a lot of air, you're supposed to value bet more because you're blocking the bluffing range, right? That's the kind of GTO side of this. So I think King Jack is a pure bet in GTO.
Okay.
The fact that the 10 comes on the river, you're very sure that villain is calling with a 10. You don't know if they're betting with a 10. You could say, oh, well, this player's good enough that they might value bet thinly enough with a 10, but it's going to depend on the kicker and their mood, and we don't know if they're going to value bet, but we do think they're likely to call us, right, if they have a 10. So the natural thing to do when you beat loads of King X, you don't really have a good enough hand to check raise, but you do have too good a hand not to bet, is just to bet. Now, with certain blocker hands here, you can probably go for a check on the river. For example, if you had 10-8 suited here, you would block the calling range more heavily than the betting range. You would unblock the polar hands like King X plus while unblocking bluffs. So with 10-8 here, that's a hand that makes a lot of sense to check raise. But with any top pair good kicker with a dangler that's blocking the bluffing range, especially at low stakes micro stakes where people are, okay, this guy might be an exception, but normally they're happy to invest by calling in these spots. They're not going to bluff like, they will maybe overbluff here by virtue of the fact they don't have enough value hands, but that doesn't mean that they're just bluffing every time they have ace high in this spot or anything. I would actually just go for a big bet here. I would just keep it simple and bet what you think the hand is worth, and I think this hand is worth more than block on this card. If the board is really sort of like changing on the river, like it's the 10 of clubs or the 9 of clubs or something, that's where lots of your range is going to be blocking, and like where some King X might start blocking. But with such a good king on a relatively clean river that gives villains some second pairs, I'm definitely just going to go for like B75 or something like that and keep it simple. You could even head up towards pot here, probably.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Opening the 8s on the button. Don't really know many of the players in this pool, don't usually play at this time. This is a board where I will just play range bet. This hand would be a checking candidate if I was playing checks, but I don't think I have much reason to play check on this board. Pretty bad turn, all things considered. Also, don't expect there to be a lot of hands that continue fluff and now fold turn, so I'm gonna check back. Rubber brick. When our opponent snap checks, I don't feel like they're that strong, but we can beat some random King X of diamond type hands, and I don't really think we get an awful lot better to fold. Maybe some Jack X, but I'll just check this back. Lose to an ace.
Yeah, so we go for like third pot range on flop here, which I think is fine. Won't say too much about that. The Queen of Spades comes on turn. Definitely a card that villain could be leading because they shift towards this card. I wouldn't expect to see that though in real life, and that's actually going to have an effect on things. If people are meant to be leading the queen turn, but they're not, they might actually have more of the good stuff, the polarized stuff, the nutty stuff in their checking range here, which might mean their range is like just check raising you more often than if they had built the donk bet, and then their checking range would be a bit more condensed, right? So that's just one thing that's like in my mind here from studying this spot in theory. I think if you had a lower pocket pair or the positions were a lot earlier, you can consider bluffing this part of your range. I would agree with you though. You said something really interesting here, which is I don't expect a lot of the hands that called the flop to fold on the turn. I do think we need to be careful with that statement because there are going to be a bunch of gutter stuff and like low flush draw. Like if you bet here and villain has 5-4 of diamonds, I don't think they have much choice but to fold a lot of the time. They might raise you sometimes. And if villain does have king x or 10x, like they just floated the flop, like 10-8, 10-7, king 7, king 5, king 4, king 3 suited, king deuce. These hands do exist as well, which is why, in theory, there can be some turn barrels. So I think it's just firstly important to remember the bottom of villain's range in these spots. But I do agree with you that 8s is not really the right hand to bluff. It's got blockers to some of the folds like 10-8, 9-8. It's going to be not totally devoid of showdown value because maybe they call flop with 7s or something like that and you win. And I agree that this is a check. And I do think it's an underfolded spot, by the way. I don't think people are going to react enough to just how sort of selective you need to be here when you bet. And I can see people like pure continuing a jack or something for one more street when they shouldn't or something like that. Even if you bet big here, like maybe even like some ace x becomes indifferent, right? I would think, and I don't think anyone's ever folding an ace. So maybe underfolded, yeah, like the check. On the river, I think you nailed it. It's not that obvious that you generate a ton of fold equity here. I think people are very bad at building block bets. We talk about this in Weapons of War, how when this action sequence takes place and it goes check, check on turn, in position is very merged, right? So out of position should really be leading here a lot of the time for a small sizing with their ace-x, and maybe even a big sizing with some of their ace-x as well. And people are just routinely checking because they're saying, oh, I'm just happy check calling, my hand isn't very good, and they don't think about going for the probe for value thinly enough, and they don't think about doing it small enough either in certain cases. So their checking range here is likely to be very overprotected, actually, in the vicinity of ace-x. They may fold a jack, they may not. I suspect they will station a jack more often than not because they'll expect this to be overbluffed, or they'll just be like, it's one more bet. I think a really underfolded spot and a very bad situation, actually, to just go for like a b75 without thinking with some air hand. I think you should actually give up with an air hand here as well. And I agree that 8s might win against like the king 9 of diamonds or pocket 6s or something. So definitely a check. Well played. Any questions on this
Thank
one?
you. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think having a more complete thought process on bottom of range on turn also is something I need to remember to do.
Yeah, it's good to remember the hands that aren't a threat to us because the human mind likes to hone in on the hands that threaten us, right? That's just what it does. That's how it scans the poker environment. So it's good to be like, oh yeah, he can have king 8 of clubs here and just like bear that in mind after you bet third pot on flop. Okay, let's jump back in.
Can go both ways. Weaker player, I'm gonna isolate them. We're just going to go 3x. I think if this wasn't a weaker player, it could go either way. Queen, queen 5. A board that I think I just want to keep betting on. I expect to get called a lot here, and I think they'll fast play a lot of the queen x a good chunk of the time. So I think we get a decent amount of transparency on this flop. This turn card's obviously really good for us. He shouldn't have an awful lot of king x. We pick up some equity, and I think we generate a lot of fold equity in this card. So I'll definitely keep barreling. I don't think there's any reason to be selective about clubs, etc. So I'm just going to barrel this turn.
Yep, talk about this one. All right, so this is really well played by you because you have an optional 3-bet or fold in theory here. Like ace jack off is basically the exact break-even point of your range in this situation. And that's a very useful milestone just to remember when you're trying to map out pre-flop. The reason you should absolutely play here is that recreationals often open wider than they should. They play worse than they should. They don't 4-bet enough. And this is just a very, very high EV spot, human versus human. The in-position 3-better just basically mops up EV like nobody's business here in the human domain because it's so much harder, of course, to play the out-of-position role here. So this is totally mandatory. I like that you 3-bet. I might have even dialed the sizing down to like 7 big blinds and just sort of said, you know what, I'm going to be using a lot of thin hands like this one. And if I do get jammed on or whatever by this non-full stack, I'd rather just lose slightly less. That's just like a very like cheeky grab of some extra EV maybe. But yeah, I think it's definitely right to 3-bet here. And maybe the sizing is actually just fine because you put more money into the pot in a favourable node and position, so who knows. Okay, onto the flop. Pretty standard stuff here. I agree with your assessment that you're going to cause a Recreational to raise a lot of their Queen X with your sizing here, and that they will give you a lot of transparency. I thought that was a great thought. And the conclusion from that I think you were leading up to was that you were going to be more aggressive than average on the turn because of that. And if that's the conclusion you're drawing, then this is definitely a very good thought process. So we go for small and villain calls. And on the king turn, as you said, very, very good card for your range. You can be close to range betting here. You can even be betting in theory here with hands like jacks and tens, because villain does still have to call some underpair if you keep your sizing down a little bit. Now, I would urge you to think about how polarized the opponent's range is here. And by that, I don't mean necessarily polar to the extreme, like nuts or air, but to what extent do they have two very clearly distinct hand classes in this spot, do you think?
Right, okay. Yeah, so they're most likely going to have sort of underpairs, ace highs, occasional draws, and then a little bit of king X and obviously some queen X.
Yeah,
So yeah, they're mostly strong hands and weak hands.
right. So what, I don't want to say what did you do wrong, because what you did is very profitable and it's very plus EV, but how could you have maximized EV further here with your turn sizing?
Go smaller. Don't need to go quite so big.
Exactly. What was the driving thought behind going close to pot here, or sort of like B, whatever this is, B78 or whatever it is?
I did actually second guess it once I clicked the size. I think B70, 77, I think is the default button. For me is just what feels to be the correct sizing on this turn. My king X will want to bet for that value, that sizing, and obviously queen X as well. I think it's not necessary. I agree. I think that was a mistake to maybe go so big because his hands are not going to be any elastic in any way between probably even like B50 to this size.
Right. So when we have value, we might just size up and say, I want to get more money in the pot against the king, although we could debate to what extent that's really necessary, given it's a fairly static board on which we're going to be able to jam the river for this SPR anyway, even if we have pot turn. At least we're not that far from being able to do that. But yeah, if I was going to go one way exploitatively on this, I'm just going smaller with my bluffs and bigger with my value here, and obviously not worried about the repercussions of that against the Recreational without a full stack with the name of Skittyboo 111, not really phased by that, not so intimidated. So yeah, I think that's exactly it. Sometimes we make these mistakes in poker where as soon as we press the button, our brain is like, uh-oh, you screwed up there. And it's a really like funny thing because it's like when we've pressed the button, we've actually gone out of our tunnel vision hyper focus mode and we suddenly see the bigger picture because we no longer need to make that decision. So if you imagine like your lens of focus is like this sort of thing that hones in when you're feeling pressure and relaxes and zooms back out when you're not feeling as much pressure, right? Oftentimes the reason a student instantly realizes a mistake upon clicking the button is that their vision zooms back out again, having like made that release of choosing something, like that relief of choice, and then they suddenly see the bigger picture. So you're tunneling in on some very specific factors here, like if I had a king I would do this, what would be my sizing theoretically, and you're putting a lot of effort into that. But then when you zoom back out and relax, you just suddenly see that, oh wait, they're inelastic here, I should have just used the smaller sizing. So that can often just be too much hyper focus on one sort of detail or something like that.
Okay, yeah,
But yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
cool.
So a weak player opens the three big blinds in the small blind. I would three bet this hand a lot against stronger players. I think against this, I'm quite happy calling and playing in position against a weaker player. He just snap range bets. This is just range for sure. We didn't even think about it. So easy continue. I don't think there's any real reason to play raise here. He snap bets again. I don't see any reason to do anything other than call here. He's going to be very wide. And he's not even really thinking. I imagine he has quite a lot of flush draw here. And again, there's no reason to do anything but call here. He's very wide range. Yeah, I mean, he's doing it with pocket fives.
Okay. So I think this is an absolute masterclass in just playing against recreational players. Like you have a pre-flop decision that could go both ways, and it's actually quite close between all three decisions in theory. But call has gone up significantly due to skill edge, as we saw the opponent completely butchered that hand. They played it like an absolutely raving baboon, and because of that, we know our EV is going up here if we, only play sensibly against this weaker opponent. So call spikes in EV pre-flop. 3-bet goes down in EV because they're underfolding and they're probably just jamming a ton at this SPR. So 3-betting has clearly got worse than normal. Calling's got better than normal. Fold is still fold. It's still 0 EV. So call is now the front runner by far. And any other play is like egregious, I would say, pre-flop here. So good call. On the flop, yeah, they're likely just betting range, but you have absolute middle. And again, it's the kind of SPR where sometimes they'll just like choose to fast play over pairs if you raise, and then you lose the chance to, you know, hit 2-pair and stack them, or hit trips and stack them, or backdoor straight. So yeah, I would definitely just call the flop c-bet here with this hand. I think it's right. I would do a lot of bluff raising though, of course, against 1/3, and I agree with your assessment that when they lazily just do this instantly, their range is everything. They're basically playing poker like some kind of very badly written computer program that's actually just worse than like an RNG that does something completely chaotic, probably. And then we go to the turn, same thing again. Amazing pot odds, you know, huge equity hand against this, not good enough to raise her value. Protection alone isn't a reason to raise, don't want to reopen, easy call. And then on the river, I've seen people level themselves in spots like this. I actually famously at the start of a Ben a Bad Beat coaching session, I was like really nervous. I was like setting things up, and I like came up with some absurd thought process where I'd painted villain as like a Machiavellian reg that only had value in a line like this. I don't think it was quite this ridiculous a line, but it was something like this, and I just forgot pot odds, forgot that there's lots of random people in pool doing random stuff, and, you know, made a really bad fold. So I've seen myself like make folds, maybe not quite in this spot, but level myself. I've seen students level themselves facing small bets here. At the end of the day, the range can be anything. It's not even like you have a bluff catcher. Bluff catcher doesn't even make sense here because they have 9s and that beats you. That's a shame. But they also have 6s and 5s and 7s, which you beat, and that's great. So your hand is actually just this random hand that gets inserted somewhere in villain's range. Like, you know, it's not at the top of villain's range, it's not at the bottom, it's somewhere towards the middle, but clearly at 20% required, we're doing amazingly here. We're probably winning like half the time on this node or something like that, 50-55% of the time in a spot where we need 20%. So if you do level yourself into folding in a spot like this for reasons like, oh, they're under bluffing, I have a bluff catcher, they wouldn't bluff for this small sizing, they're milking me, you don't deserve to play the game. That's unacceptable thought process. You shouldn't do that. Okay, happy with that? We can move on. How iconic. Spuds with the pocket spuds. Let's go. I really hope this becomes a hand.
Fingers crossed. So open on the button, obviously. 2 weaker players behind. Oh, we get called top set. Very nice. Player leads into us. Interesting. So because it's a bigger sizing, I'm more incentivized to want to fast play this a bit. We do also block the value region. I expect when he calls in a small blind, he's going to have a lot of middle set, bottom set, and like suited connectors. I really want to fast play this given the sizing. I'm going to make it a small raise though. I think just like 3x is fine. We could make a lot of reason for calling in position as well. But I kind of want to just get the money in now. Well, there's like I don't expect him to have many bet folds here, given his sizing. He does.
So guys, if you don't know why pocket tens are called pocket potatoes, you'll never ever wait. No, you will know because we told you on a recent video called "This Is the Truth" or "It's Time for the Truth" or something like that. Yeah, you can go and find out why they're called pocket potatoes now. There's no more secrets. Anyway, this hand was definitely a symbolic moment in Carrot Corner history where Spuds flopped top set with the Spuds and then faced a big flop bet. I totally get why it's tempting to slow play here, but I think you arrived at the right conclusion, which is that recreational players that just suddenly lead big on the flop, they can be bluffing you with nothing, and it is possible that some of those people who are bluffing you with nothing are also going to bluff the turn and the river. But for the most part, this isn't an archetypal polarized range. It's like either something really, really strong or something that's going to bluff off, right? It's not that, right? If this was a really polar range, you just call here with top set because you're in position, you can ensure pot growth, and you want them to keep firing like the gutter and stuff like that, and you want them to keep value betting as well when they have a lower set, want to keep betting a flush draw when it doesn't get there. Like, you're fine, you're not in any real hurry. But I think I totally agree in real life that this is merged hands. This is like a 6, this is a 10. Even though you block a 10, this is still a 10 a lot of the time, because it's so often a 10 without you having two 10s that even when there's only 110 left and they have 33% of the 10s they normally have, it's still really often a 10, or a flush draw, or a 4-5, or a 6, or something equity driven, or 2-pair, or set, or something like that. So, big fan of fast playing here. I agree with your assessment that you just don't expect to get a lot of folds. There's a lot of bet calls. It's a horrible spot to start like bluff raising the recreational generally when they just come out and lead big. Therefore, it's just a really good spot for value, and unlucky that we don't get any action.
Okay, so recreational limps the button. Well, we're assuming a recreational. I'm just going to check this back. I don't think there's an awful lot of reason to raise this. I think they'll probably over continue versus raise. This flop, I'm going to check. And okay, snap check back. Queen's not great. I would fire bricks, paired cards. I still think I'm going to. The snap check back means that they just don't have very many good hands. I'm tempted to actually kind of polarize here. I think if we go very big and very big again. Oh, okay. Well, we hit our card. Interesting. He's going to have a lot of one spade type hands, although given he just Snapchat by flop, I don't expect him to be the type to bluff. Trying to work out if block or bigger is better here. I think Queen X just won't fold to a middling size. I'm worried about going any bigger than this. I think they will start finding folds. Could also see a lot of reason to block.
Interesting. So we have a spot where button limps, we check in the big blind naturally with the king 5 offsuit, flop goes check check, and the timing is really, really quick on flop. And I like that you're noticing timing. I think this is a very neglected part of the game, so that's good. On the turn, I think one issue here is that the queen is very polarizing to your opponent. Like, they're either going to have a spade or a queen or a straight draw or nothing in this situation. And if they have the bunch of something hands, they're never folding and you're putting money into the pot, and quite a lot of money relative to the size of the pot in the pot, drawing extremely thin, and that's not good. Meanwhile, if they don't have anything here, they're incredibly likely to check again because they've already shown us that they are the type of person to limp the button and to check the flop instantly. How likely is it that that sort of villain then just suddenly ignites a bluff on turn when checked to? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, okay, makes a lot of sense.
Kind of rhetorical. It's not very likely. So what we should do here is just use the argument for transparency, and we should just check again, and then we should bluff the river if we think it's necessary. I'll also point out, though, that on a brick river, we will actually have showdown value because they're going to check down 8 high, 9 high, 7 high, jack high, you name it. They're not going to be like, I limped the button and now it's range advantage is preserved over 3 streets as per grade 2 of the Carrot Poker School lecture 2, I believe. Therefore, it's river blunder theorem, and one day I'll study how to not limp the button pre, and I'll move on to that. Like, that's not actually what's happening. So they're going to bet, like, sometimes with a bluff on the river, but they've already kind of put themselves in the pen of player who doesn't like to bluff and is passive and is just, like, trying to hit stuff. So yeah, you'll even show down with king high. But if you are going to bluff, wait for the river, bluff there. Definitely hate the thought process of, I might just polarize, because it has nothing to do with what the best play is. And it's kind of like a vague kind of like forming a strategy thing in a spot against a recreational where one player is almost certainly better than the other. Which is it? If you are going to lead small, because your opponent's folding range is folding anyway for the most part. And if they've connected with the queen, they're not. People are very likely to bet the flop if they've hit a pair or have a pocket pair or a 10, and same with like a draw usually, and they're quite likely to check the flop but just nothing. So if their folding range is nothing on the turn, you can just lead really small. But I'd rather just check and wait till river, get that full transparency.
Okay, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so recreational player, assuming again, limps the cutoff. I don't think this hand's good enough to raise. I'll just play check back. Yeah, don't see much reason. Check, snap checks back. It's quite an interesting turn card. I don't think this hand's good enough to bet, as he might also have some pocket pairs in his Snapchat bet range, although he might have worse pocket pairs that we'll call a bet. Don't think he has many draws. Could have some clubs. Could have some ace highs. I'm tempted to lead small here. I think I'm just going to check. He Snapchats back, and then we'll bet river for value. I think we can go pretty healthy here. I expect him to call ace high a decent chunk given his line. Just folds.
So yeah, I mean, this this opponent was throwing all kinds of different hands at you. They were throwing like high fives, like hand, like rubbing your avatar. Loads of weird stuff was going on here. I don't know what it was all about, but I tried to ignore it in case they were trying to level us, you know, just like I'm not looking at the hand gestures. They might level me. They might be a step ahead exploitatively. So I just ignored the hands. But here, like, such a cool spot because it's in contrast to the hand we just spoke about. In the last hand, you had nothing, and we thought your opponent's range was like they've either just hit or not. They're kind of polar. Here, they're actually a lot more merged capped, right? Because they've snap checked back king, queen, queen. They almost certainly don't have a king or a queen or a high EV draw. They probably just have under pair, ace high. And how likely are they to bluff the river? Remember, in theory, when you don't bet your middling hand on the turn, A, it's middling, so it's not strong enough to bet, and B, you're getting some EV maybe by them bluffing the next street. But here, you're just giving a free card to a range that's not going to bluff you on the river anyway, like most likely. He's just trying to like get through the hand and hit something. And your hand is much, much better here than what you had before. So when you lead here for one big blind, right? I think it's way better than checking because you deny equity to all kinds of overcards that crucially you don't make much money from or any money from by checking. They just invest if they get there. And you can be called by gut shots, under pairs, ace high at some frequency as well. So big fan of playing this spot in quite a linear way where we actually lead really thinly for, you know, value. And when we're bluffing, it's not that we don't want to bluff or we don't think bluffing's profitable. We do think it's profitable, but we might just give villain one more chance to confirm that they have the nothing part of their range because they will have some slow play on this node, and then we might wait till the river to bluff. So yeah, it's a really neglected thing. No one really talks about how to maximize in limped pots, but a lot of your win rate comes from playing against fish, and one play is very clearly better than the other against fish in most spots. And so that's a really golden opportunity to actually study some non-standard silly looking spots and get really good at them, because that's how you can maximize your win rate the most, is beating fish for the maximum. So I think it is worth looking at these spots.
Okay, player opens 2.4 in the small blinds. I'm assuming them to be weaker because of the sizing. First, with the smaller sizing, I'm assuming we're more incentivized to call, also assuming it's a weaker player. This hand will generate a lot of good fold equity, and I think they will overfold, but I will call the spot. Flop top pair. They should be range betting this, I imagine. I actually don't know if it's theoretical, but when they check, I think they're going to be condensed to a lot of crap if they're just not c-betting, and then a lot of middling hands. So we're going to value bet here. That would check back a decent amount, but I think there's a lot of value to be had against the middling part of the range that won't invest through bets. They snap call, one of the worst turn cards on the turn, completes a lot of two pairs, complete straights. They don't lead. I don't think there's any reason to continue here. They just don't have many hands that want to continue flop and then bluff turn. So I'm going to fold.
Yep, good fold. So yeah, this is definitely a video about the nitty gritty of poker, right? Like finding all of the blood from the stone in these seemingly mundane, but actually very common and important spots. Look how I'm trying to make this exciting for the audience here. Guys, you're enjoying this video. These spots are wild. They're exciting. Ace 6. Yeah, I think this is a golden opportunity to just say, right, villain's range is a very specific way here. It's not going to be properly protected, balanced, etc. It's not even a really standard spot to do much checking in. So there's going to be an opportunity here. So what is villain's range? Villain's range is mostly second pair, some top pair that beats you, the odd slow play that beats you, but mostly like pocket kings, 10x, queen x, stuff like this. And then, as you said, let's not forget about the bottom of range here, 6, 7, pocket threes, hands that are literally just nearly dead against your hand. Now, is your hand worth 3 streets? Like, are you going to go bet here? Is that part of the plan?
No.
If that's not part of the plan, you could ask yourself, how urgent is it that I start betting immediately? And is there a downside of betting immediately against that range that we just outlined?
Yeah, we get some folds out of hands that may elect to bluff later, for sure.
Right. So you can be very patient here. If you're only playing this for 2 streets against a 10 or a queen or pocket kings or something, or jacks, you can be very patient with that because these hands they're not folding the flop. It's not like you're cleaning up their live outs to a straight or anything like that. And you can get the value from them more cleanly once you know the run out is a brick, right? It's actually kind of funny. If villain has jack 10 here, and you're betting two streets, you'd rather value bet blank turn and blank river than flop that still has branches where river is wet, because that hand doesn't fold flop and it wins the pot from you on those wetter branches. So when you do that sort of my hand against an example hand in his range analysis, it's best to just wait before you value bet if you're sure that you're only going to be betting twice. Now, as you say, if you bet the flop here and 5-4 folds when 5-4 was going to lead the turn, okay, I think very often it will just give up all the way through the hand, but sometimes it will take a stab purely because you checked and you've just lost out on that stab for no real gain, right? So you did the range analysis correctly here, but then you kind of compared bet to check, forgetting that there's a ceiling on what your hand is going to put in by the end. Your thought process would have been great with a straight or two pair or something, or good ace, because that ceiling is now much higher and you can bet 3 times. But with a hand that's betting twice, definitely better to check the flop and let the random people in this pool make a turn stab with pocket fives that would have check folded flop, or with 5-3 suited that would have check folded flop.
Yep. Okay, makes a lot of sense.
So it does matter what we do in these nitty gritty sort of mundane spots, guys. Don't neglect them. They are a big part of your win rate. All right, Spuds, this has been a lot of fun. We experienced a painful moment at the beginning of the session, but I think we played fairly well after that, recovered nicely. There's no way that this hand actually happened at the end of the session and we put it at the start. That definitely didn't happen, guys. How would you summarize this? How have you enjoyed it? Anything you're going to take away from it? I know it was a little bit card dead at certain points, but what will you sort of take away from this coaching session?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to take away from it. I think most notably being more cognizant of turn spots where we have the opportunity to bet with bluffs and bet with value against a range that's really not that strong at all. I think being aware that we can value bet thinly with the opportunity to also get some denial as well as value, and then also just get more transparency when we check. I think that's a really big point that I've picked up today.
Yeah, I think you were already using that though, because you mentioned transparency actually before I did, near the beginning of the session. So yeah, really good. And I would say as well, do a bit of work on a playbook, like sort of standardize, like where will I use big bets, where will I use small, try and map that out. We do that in Weapons of War, right? We're like, we introduce a lot of different options for the toolkit, but we don't recommend using lots of them at the same time. So we're kind of saying, this is an overbet turn delayed c-bet spot, or this is a spot where I'll use a lot of block on the river, or this is a spot where I'll mostly just be overbetting, and we kind of map that out first. So Weapons of War can help with that, guys, if you're looking to do a similar thing and build the right tool so it's easily accessible in each spot and help you identify which spot is which. And yeah, I'll just remind you once more, the Black Friday sale is almost upon us. It is, of course, this Friday, which is the 20 something of November. Editor put whatever the date of Black Friday this year is on screen. It's like the 29th or something like that, right? Let me know if I got that right. And yeah, everything is going to be 25% off at Carrot Corner site-wide, including our mega package, the Golden Carrot. If you've not dipped your toes into the carrot waters yet and you're looking to take the plunge, you can get everything all at once with that at carrotcorner.com. So we will see you back here for more Poker Inferno. Let us know if you like it. And well done, Spuds. Thank you for taking part today. You've been a great contestant despite the deck not really being very kind to you or giving you much that's interesting.
Thank you very much. Had a great time.
All right, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.